At the beginning of the 1800s, the United States was much smaller than it is today. In fact, all of what is today the state of California was once Mexican land. In 1848, however, the United States and Mexico fought in the Mexican-American War. The United States eventually won the war, and, as a result, it gained a lot of land from Mexico, including California. California then became a new state in the United States of America. When this land changed hands, the people living in California now had to live under a different government. Although they used to all be Mexican citizens, there was a great diversity of people living in this land, with people having ancestors from Spain, ancestors who were indigenous to the Americas, and ancestors who had both Spanish and indigenous ancestry. When California became a part of the United States, even more diversity came to exist in the state. White settlers from the east of the United States came over in large numbers in the early 1850s when the California Gold Rush began. Many people came to California for the first time seeking a fortune searching for gold. These people started new lives in the West. However, there was much competition in the gold rush, and conflict arose between the new white settlers and other non-white groups, such as the Native Californians. This was the first time that many of the settlers met Native Californians and Mexican people, and the competition of the gold rush often led to negative stereotypes of these people. White settlers often thought of Mexican people as dirty, lazy, and being less important than white people. Even though these negative views of Native people existed, that did not mean that white people and Native people never interacted. In fact, there were many marriages between the two groups, mostly between white men and Native women. As more and more settlers came to California, life became more and more difficult for the Native people still living there. The United States government shared many of the same views as the white settlers and made laws that upset the way of life that many of the Native people had known for many generations. Native people soon lost much of their land and property, and life became very difficult for this group. By the end of the 1800s and the beginning of the 20th century, there were many common stereotypes of Native people in California held by white settlers. However, the stereotypes were not always the same for Native men and Native women. The now largely poor Mexican men were usually seen as a weak, cowardly, and worthless race. Their poverty was seen by whites as a result of their lack of motivation and not as the result of white invasion of their territory. The women, however, were seen as having loose morals and as always desiring a white husband. When Native women married white men, it was seen as a sign by the white men that they were a better choice than Mexican men. The white men saw themselves as being more masculine and more manly than Mexican men. This made them feel good about coming into the Mexican territory and taking over, because they saw themselves to be better in general. The fact that Mexican women would marry white men also gave the white men a justification for coming into California and taking over. They thought that since the Mexican women liked them more than the Mexican men, they did the right thing in taking the land away from the Native people. But what came of these marriages between white men and Mexican women? Negative stereotypes also surrounded those marriages in the white community. People thought that the negative stereotypes of laziness were actually a part of Mexican blood, and that children of a white man and a Mexican woman would weaken the blood of the white man in the children. Even though these marriages between the white men and Mexican women existed, it did not mean that they were free from judgment or stereotyping. Stereotypes based on race and on gender played a large role in Californian history. Mexican men and women were affected differently by these stereotypes, and the stereotypes also applied to interracial marriages. It is important to see racism and its historical forms in the United States so that we may learn more about our present and hope to make positive changes in the future.